Okay, so hello everyone. Today we have a session with a webinar with Arpit Ratan on privacy issues in Aadhar. Now, Arpit is a partner at Ojas Legal and co-founder at snixy.com. Arpit was recently selected as Forbes 30 under 30. He has a keen interest in financial regulations and technology and the newly emerging fields of fintech and other technologies. Welcome, Arpit. Thanks for taking out time for us.
Hi, welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Now,
Good
without
time.
taking much of your time, I would like to have Arpit with us. And now he'll start with the session. Okay, so
Sure.
so Arpit, first of all, I would like to know if you can give any overview about the topic, or then we can start with the question answer sessions.
Okay, I'll just give a very brief overview. Uh, what we're discussing right now is Aadhaar and its security and privacy concerns. Why is that important? Is because very soon it's going to be the single identifier, whether it in terms of payments or maybe in terms of contracts. So a lot of transactions that we see today may tomorrow happen through Aadhaar identities. And what I feel is that it's very important to understand the entire architecture of Aadhaar because in future, at least I can predict that there will be a lot of litigation which will either involve transaction which was done through an Aadhaar mechanism, or may include signatures, electronic signatures, which also involve the usage of Aadhaar. So, one of the things that we should do as people who are interested in the legal field is to understand how this architecture works, and so it will give us a lot of background wherever there is a dispute, how to deal with it.
Uh, what would it like? What would be the common privacy concerns for this?
Yeah. So I think one of the concerns, like any other identity which is global, is identity theft. And in an offline world, identity theft would mean somebody forging your card and basically trying to be who you are, and then maybe carrying out transactions on your behalf in an offline world. One of the advantages of an offline world is always that because there's so many human engagements, there are chances that at some point of time, some human may have recognized him and will find out there's a fraud, or will find that there's something fishy, and he will recognize a fraud, and then he will alert the entire system. The problem with a cyber identity or a online identity like Aadhaar is tomorrow, once transactions starts happening and somebody steals your online identity, then the system will never recognize it till the person raises an alarm whose identity has been stolen. So once the system recognizes an identity pattern and accepts it, that particular identity will pass through all systems. So that's one of the very, very major security concerns of any online identity. On side of privacy, I think one of the key features of Aadhaar is the ability that any person, uh, not any person, but a lot of entities who have the license can ping the Aadhaar database and can find your private details, of course, by your consent. Uh, but even post you give a consent, there's a lot of data about you which is available from Aadhaar KYC, and which may which can be stored by these third parties which are pinging. So I think that is a very, very big security concern because unlike other databases, Aadhaar database also includes your biometrics, which is fingerprint and your iris, something which can be misused if it is in wrong hands.
Okay, so the next which I would like to know is what are the circumstances under which the government can access our Aadhaar details?
Uh, See, government or non-government, uh, Aadhaar database can be accessed in two ways. One is without your consent. When it's being accessed, see, actually, there are two parts of this question. One is there is a legal way to access Aadhaar database, which basically even the government can, wherein it will take your consent, uh, which is today via OTP or via some sort of biometric, and it will ping the Aadhaar database, find out your details. But I think the major concern is more in terms of unauthorized access because all this database today is sitting on servers which belong to the government, UIDI, but I mean, in effect, it's the government. The major problem which I think people feel is that tomorrow, in case of some sort of a uh, crackdown, it may so happen that the government may use this database to profile people or to identify people without taking their consents. Because as far whenever it comes to security concerns, the government is being and has been doing a lot of things which may or may not be completely legal or ethical. So one of the concerns with any database which government holds is that it may tomorrow, in case of security concerns, use it without authorized access to find out details about each person. And I think that is where uh, most privacy groups are always anti such databases because it allows the government too much visible into each individual.
Okay, so if I come to the next thing, that what are the regulations and compliance of bodies taking Aadhaar details for providing services?
Yeah. See, there is an act. Uh, then there are various regulations around the usage of Aadhaar. There has also been rules which have been framed and passed. So there are several rules, in fact, which have been framed and passed through Parliament. And at least from a legal standpoint, there have been enough uh, provisions which are made in case there is unauthorized access, in case somebody breach your privacy, in case one of these third parties which is allowed to ping the other database stores your information, and these are uh, criminal offenses. So in a way, at least the law has provided a lot of restrictions for storage of information, for sharing of information, and all this has created some sort of a legal barrier for people to share information. But one of the um, key concerns is that in India, law takes its own course and may take years before the guilty gets punished, because of which a lot of laws that we actually pass remain only on paper and are very, very ineffective. So I think the actual concern is that basically tomorrow you may have and there was a breach very recently, uh, which may involve a lot of loss to a lot of individuals. Uh, the law in India, even if drafted very strongly, is very difficult to enforce, because of which the frauds through the Aadhaar databases may not be punished as swiftly as one would want, which will then in turn one create distrust for the Aadhaar system, and second, it may also lead to people getting encouraged to do more such frauds. So one of the important things for Aadhaar to survive is would be to there be very swift enforcement. Whenever there's a breach of Aadhaar, maybe there can be a separate body which deals with these kind of crimes rather than just giving it to the judiciary, which is already overburdened. So maybe we can create separate tribunal or some body, but the idea should be that whenever there are breaches of Aadhaar, they should be dealt very swiftly.
Okay, now if the legal prohibition on unauthorized usage of Aadhaar details, what are that legal prohibitions?
So as I said, I think this we've already discussed is that there is an act uh, Aadhaar for Aadhaar. Then there are rules, Aadhaar authentication rules, and then there are several rules that are in fact framed around Aadhaar. Plus there are regulations for usage of each type of service. So there is like very large body of legal regulations around Aadhaar. This definitely one of the things it does is creates a lot of rules of how this information gets shared, protected, and the second is it creates consequences for breach of these provisions. So sharing of data from Aadhaar, at least legally, is very well protected. So it can only be done from user consent or from consent of the Aadhaar holder, and can only be used for the purpose for which consent is given. So in that way, legally, the whole Aadhaar architecture is consent based, wherein it requires the person's consent for the information to flow in and out.
Okay, can a person remove his name from the Aadhaar database or restrict its uses?
Yes, so both are possible. You can temporarily suspend. You cannot remove the name from Aadhaar database. That's there is no such provision to remove the name, but you can suspend any person finding out about it, which means in a way, in your case, nobody will be able to ping the Aadhaar database to find your details, but it will still remain on the server. And the second is also that, for example, biometric is one of the services that you can always disable in your uh, you know UIDI account, which means that you will not be able to enable biometric services because that's something which can be concern to people. So you can always disable biometric from your Aadhaar, even though you might have given biometrics, but you can choose to disable that. So that way it allows flexibility for a person to either put his card on hold, which means other people might not be able to find information about him, or also maybe stop the biometric ping for some time. And he can temporarily, in fact, start and stop biometric. But how it will be done, that because for that you have to make an application to UIDI. So how it is being done or will be done, that I'm not clear about. But at least the law creates provisions for it.
Okay, can a person check his identity information stored in UIDI?
Yeah, that you can do very easily. Every person can check his information completely online. Unlike other IDs, Aadhaar ID is completely digital ID, and all information is available on the portal. A person has to answer few questions, put in the right inputs, and accordingly he can then access his own information.
Okay, what do you do in case our Aadhaar details are missed? And what should a person do?
So that way UIDI is very good in a way. Uh, it will allow you to basically, there are a lot of centers where you can go update your details. So I think there from a government standpoint, I think it's one of the best services implementation which has happened. So there are enough centers, there are enough people to whom you can update your Aadhaar information. So I think that's quite simple.
Would you like to discuss any other points, or would you like to do some other points on this?
See, one of the things I think we need to discuss is that why Aadhaar was brought in by the government, what was its initial mission at least, and where it's going now, and what where is the line. So I think one of the initial missions of Aadhaar was to create unique identity. The idea was to keep it as minimum as possible, and in future use this identity to basically provide benefits. That was at least originally it was said, is to provide benefits to the poor. So, for example, today your direct account transfers are being made based on your Aadhaar numbers linked to bank accounts for rural schemes, for a lot of rural schemes. Now, that was one of the core missions, and there I think Aadhaar really does well and is able to basically effectively provide a government service which earlier uh, was happening through state agencies and machineries, which led to rampant corruption, a lot of leakages. So I think one key thing which has happened is that because of Aadhaar, all these leakages have stopped, and I think Aadhaar has done very, very well uh, in providing uh, that efficiency in fund transfers to accounts, and especially implementing schemes like the gas subsidy scheme, like Enrega scheme. So I think there it has done very well. Uh, Now, what Aadhaar is being done is creating it an identity for doing all your transactions, including banking transactions. Uh, that is, I think, not one of the initial thought process for Aadhaar. One of the reasons why I I think it should not be done, at least according to me, is because I did not sign up when I was signing up for Aadhaar to link my account number or my financial details to my identity, and that can be large privacy concern. That seeding more and more data into Aadhaar, which includes my financial history. The second concern, obviously, in attaching financial details to Aadhaar is that anyone who gets access to my Aadhaar and Aadhaar details, and maybe if accesses my other uh, things like OTP, he can start doing banking transactions on my behalf, which uh, basically can lead to a lot of frauds in the system. In case of a bank transfer or direct bank transfer DBT scheme, there is less likelihood of somebody taking that money outside my bank account. So putting in is okay, but taking out of my bank account is something which Aadhaar will enable, and it will time will tell how it pans out. But that can be one of the security concerns that people have, and government is trying to bring amendment to the act to make it compulsory at a lot of places, which is again a big concern because Supreme Court at least made it clear in its last judgment that it has to be a optional provision, right? The option has to be given to the user. But how we see it's happening today is it's turning more and more into a very, very compulsory government scheme. So you must have, in fact, read that government is applying it even in midday meals to children. Similarly, I read very recently that it has become one of the compulsory documents when you're applying for a 10th class board exam. Now, the problem with both of them is that the person who's applying is not even one is obviously it's compulsory, which I don't think government can make anything compulsory linked to something as basic as education or as food. The second problem is, of course, is that in both cases the person is under the age of 18, and because he's under the age of 18, uh, when I'm submitting my information to Aadhar, I'm signing a contract in a way with Aadhar that how Aadhar will use this information, how will I basically tomorrow access this information, and it is under a contract that I give to Aadhar my information. The problem with persons below 18 is that they cannot even legally enter into a contract and making, or even in fact as per the Indian law we do not, or in fact global law, we do not consider them to be people who can vote because we feel that they do not have the maturity or the reasonability to make decisions. And submitting your details into Aadhar has to be a choice and it has to be a decision. So for anyone that you're enforcing this below the years of 18, uh, it may not be as correct because the person may not have the uh, choice, and this choice might be made by his parents, and there would not be any way to reverse this. So that I think is the large problem, where the government is making it compulsory, because that I don't think was the initial Aadhaar mandate, at least.
Even I came across one thing that even for the students who are just taking the admission in the first standard or even less than that, there is a compulsion to get the Aadhaar card in many of the schools. So it has been taken to the school level also at a very junior level.
Yes, yes, and I think linking education and I mean basic necessities like education and food, I don't think, because Supreme Court in at least its last judgment was very clear that Aadhaar has to be an optional scheme, and that is the only reason they allowed this whole Aadhaar scheme to come into being, because they said as long as it's optional, it is fine. But having it compulsory, I mean, if it's compulsory, then everyone has the right to privacy, and everyone should be given an option to opt out of Aadhaar. If I don't want to share my personal details or make it available for a third party to ping, I should have the option to opt out. And that is what Supreme Court also said, that don't make it compulsory, have the option to opt out. But the problem is that if you link it to education and food, then you're not leaving that choice with people, you're making it compulsory, which I don't think uh, was the mandate of was at least the mandate given by Supreme Court.
Okay. Anything else? Any other point which you feel that it's more important? I know you have covered almost everything which was required. Still, if you think something has missed and which the people should know,
No, I think we have covered everything in this particular webinar, which I feel is meant to be understood about Aadhaar. One thing I think which everyone can do independently is to understand Aadhaar structure, because all information about Aadhaar is very open and very public. And the second is to understand uh, the security concerns in terms of what amount of data and how the data can be taken, and both can be understood by reading a lot of online things which are available about Aadhaar. And then I think everyone has to make, and it's a call of privacy. I think it's a purely call of privacy. Do you want to share your data? Do you not want to share your data? And I think everyone has their own degrees of concern. Some people may feel very touchy about their private information. Some people do not mind sharing it openly. So I think it's a personal choice, and each person should make that choice about Aadhaar um, himself as well.
okay. Then thanks Arpit for the session and thank you so much for all the important information which was required.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.